Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tonic podcast. My name is Drew, and I'm joined by my colleague and friend Alex. Today, we will be discussing the ongoing impeachment process and the updates on that and where it's going. So to kind of recap, the process started in the House Intelligence Committee to basically guide our intelligence and use hearings to determine whether or not to continue with the impeachment process. It's then moved to the House Judiciary Committee, and they voted 23-17 to have two articles of impeachment against the President of the United States, one of which is breaking his oath of office, and the second of which is obstruction of Congress. And we'll get into what exactly those mean in a bit. But start off, how you been, Alex, and how you doing?
Hey, Drew. I'm doing pretty well, honestly. Sitting in Madrid in my Packers jersey. I was watching some Packers-Bears football earlier. It was halftime, so that means it's Tonic Accord time, I guess.
There you go.
Yeah, life is good, man. How about yourself?
Life is fine here. I'm getting up to the holidays. I always get a little anxious about gift giving, but I don't know why. It turns out fine every year. But, it's the holidays here, and it's also kind of a nice distraction to spend time with family and stuff, to get away from politics for once, because as we all know, everyone that's listening in, it's been pretty crazy. It's been pretty crazy last year. So
yes,
let's dive right into it. So the House Judiciary Committee votes along party lines, unsurprisingly, 23-17, to move forward with these two articles of impeachment. So let's talk about the first one, violating the oath of office. And that's basically in reference to putting the allegation that Trump put his personal gain above the national interest in his dealings with Ukraine in regards to opening an investigation against Joe Biden's son. What do you think about that? Is that a valid article of impeachment?
So I want to start by just saying that at first I was taken a little bit aback when I saw that only two articles were pushed forward. I think the narrative along the news media for the last 2 months has been extortion, bribery, obstruction of justice, collusion, and it seems like things are finally starting to be kind of siphoned down to something that people can actually get their minds around. And to be honest, yes, the first article, as you'd mentioned, which is violating his oath of office, to be honest, I think it makes a lot of sense. Later on, we can debate the validity of these charges, but I do think it's a smart one to go because the three previous times Congress moved towards impeaching a president, this article was also focused on this because it's crucial. Basically, the president is supposed to be the commander-in-chief. He's the diplomat-in-chief, and he is supposed to be the one that is doing things on the U.S. interest. And I think the big difference between this impeachment and previous impeachments are this one, what Trump has done could directly impact U.S. national security. Clinton, he lied about basically some scandalous activity in the White House. Nixon lied about the cover-up. Both of those were more personal gains, but this one sounds like Trump was actually looking for political reasons. And so if he did this, if he tried to withhold money from Ukraine for personal and political reasons to investigate the Bidens, I think that tells me that it was something worth looking at because it could have put at risk the U.S. Diplomatic process. And I think that is worth talking about. And I think Nancy Pelosi knows very well that if this is going to have any traction, especially in the Senate, it needs to be simple and direct. You know what I mean? Right.
And I also think that the key, it's broad enough, right? Violating the oath of office, that instead of having to, dive into the details of an exact thing of extortion or bribery, I think it's a lot easier to argue, generally breaking the oath of office in the high crimes and misdemeanors sense, which is a lot less specific. And I think that's also why we've seen that with all the other impeachment processes in the past. It's just kind of a general, you broke your oath of office.
Exactly.
You basically did something that's completely unpresidential or allegedly. And that's a lot different than a legal definition of bribery, right? And yeah, I mean, I personally think that Trump broke his oath of office, and I see this as okay, yeah, this is just the overall reason to impeach. would be the fact that he put himself over the national interest. And like you said, in this case, especially with Ukraine, dealing with Ukraine and Ukraine's neighbor, Russia, there's a lot of national security implications. But then we get to the second one, which is a little bit more interesting, and I think it's going to be kind of, in fact, even more contentious, is the obstruction of Congress. Basically, obstruction of Congress would be, the president doing everything he can to impede any investigations against him and obstruct Congress. The argument, I think, would be that the Democrats are making that all the subpoenas and the fact that the White House counsel strongly encouraged a lot of people not to testify is what they're going to be focusing on for this part of for this article of impeachment.
Yes. And that's a good point there, is they're focusing on these subpoenas. And it's an interesting change for me. And actually, for me, the second article was actually stronger than the first, because the problem is impeachment is a congressional action. It's not an executive branch action. And this Trump presidency has seemed to turn impeachment into somewhat of a process that is being dictated by the executive branch. Trump has indirectly and debatably told certain witnesses they cannot testify. And it's kind of interesting now looking at where it's going into the Senate, where they don't want to hold any witnesses. But like a lot of Republicans argue that it was a one-sided inquiry, given that Democrats picked their witnesses and there were not a lot of Trump's witnesses. But the problem is Trump's counsel did not work alongside Congress. And so for me, it's an interesting choice for them to do obstruction of Congress and not obstruction of justice. And I think this is a big takeaway from this, because usually obstruction of justice is what you would think would be the just obvious next step in this. But it tells you that, like, to me, it tells people that maybe there's not a strong case for obstruction of justice. And then it makes you wonder, will the case be stronger for obstruction of Congress? Because I've heard a lot of Republican arguments on this that basically just say that it wasn't a fair impeachment inquiry in the House, and Trump never really had the opportunity to pick his witnesses, which I think is half true and half incorrect. But it does make you wonder, is why are they going to obstruction of Congress and not going full in with obstruction of justice,
Right. Well, because I think, it's the thing that, like, a lot of people are talking about. Like you said, the Republicans are saying that Trump never got to pick his witnesses and never got to cross-examine or whatever. Well, yeah, but that's because we're not in the court part of it yet. An impeachment process is not the same as your day-to-day lawyer v. lawyer court process. And a lot of people are conflating it to be like that. I also think that's one of the reasons they're not going with obstruction of justice, right? Because, if you're in the regular court process and you're telling a witness not to talk, that would be obstruction of justice. But we're in the impeachment process, so it's not like that. So when Trump says, on Twitter, like, this person shouldn't testify, it's not within the parameters of, like, the regular court process to classify as, like, obstructing justice. So I think it goes right. So the fact that it's not your, like, average court process means that Democrats can't look at his tweets and his subpoenas as the same way you could for obstruction of justice. And in the same sense, Republicans can't view this as an unfair trial because it's not a trial. There's nothing in the impeachment process that says that Trump's lawyers can cross-examine the investigative witnesses. Like, that's not part of it. That's just the rules. Now we can debate if those rules should be changed, but I think both sides are realizing that some of the rules are not in their favor, right? And like the whole thing with the Republicans out storming the gates with their phones and stuff, is that they didn't have a say in the hearing, the backdoor hearings. Like, I mean, come on, like there were Republicans that could have gone in there. Like, it's, again, like they're conflating this process to be unfair, but as far as I can tell, all the rules of the impeachment process are being followed. You can still argue that they shouldn't be started the impeachment in the first place, but the rules of the process are being followed, and we're seeing that.
That's a fair point, because I think you really touched it on the head when you said that it's not supposed to be a trial. This is just the beginning initiating step of, like,
Exactly.
It's literally called an impeachment inquiry. It's not called the impeachment trial. That's
Right.
the Senate.
The trial's in the Senate.
Right. No, completely. But my big issue is that the founders warned about this intrinsically from the beginning. is they talked about impeachment by one party is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And see, the problem is in like I've been listening to a few podcasts, reading a few articles throughout this week while all this is going on, and I think that sounds to me like the biggest difference between Clinton and now is that back then there was at least a few people on either side that were willing to listen to the facts. And right now it does seem like this is an impeachment that only Democrats want. And so even if what Trump is doing is incorrect, it to me does feel like even though it's an impeachment inquiry, it's become an impeachment trial just because everyone knows that the left that is running this impeachment, they want Trump out. And so there's to me there's a feeling of this party just wants him gone and the other party just wants to defend him. And that's exactly what the framers warned about, was a one-party impeachment. And I think that's the reason why numbers are declining, impeachment's back to about 50-50 in support, is because people are in their aisles, they're in their corners. And I don't think this means jack shit. I'll block that out later, but it doesn't.
No, I don't think we have to do that. I don't think we have to block that out. I think a swear word every now and then is fine. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. Like, I think it's pretty obvious that the Democrats want any chance to get rid of Trump and to make Trump look bad. That's true. That's definitely true. I also think that Republicans have shown time and time again that they're willing to defend Trump no matter what. I mean, even if it's like a little slap in the wrist here, like, oh, I don't agree with Trump on some trade deal stuff, they'll still overlook him, they'll still support him, and they'll still, kiss his ring, basically. So, yeah, you have two entrenched parties not really trying to, not really trying to proceed in good faith.
That's fair.
And but let's be again, I still think that there has been impeachable offenses. So yes, even though the Democrats are frothing at the mouth to find anything to take down Trump is still messing up and kind of giving them ammo. I mean, again, there wouldn't have been this whole process without the Ukraine scandal to begin with. Like Nancy Pelosi wasn't going to start impeachment even over the Mueller report. That kind of came and went. Some campaign managers went to jail, but Trump came out of that pretty unscathed. And there was no plans to go with impeachment until we learned about the whistleblower in the Ukraine scandal, which is Trump and Rudy Giuliani's fault in the first place. So yeah, I do think fair point. I do think both parties are kind of very entrenched, but I don't think that I don't think the initial impeachment offenses are false. I think they're real. It's just gonna be I don't know. It does seem like it's just all a show. And to that point, I mentioned this before we started recording, is I haven't been able to even really watch the hearings live because it's so annoying, frankly. Again, everyone's already entrenched. I kind of already have my own opinion, and I'm willing to hear other sides. But when I see it on TV, it's just like a grandstanding show, and I can't stand that. I cringe when I see people grandstand from any side.
Yeah, I think that's a point well taken. And so I'm 9 hours different from you, so I have a very different viewing schedule of these than you would, I'm imagining, unless you don't sleep at all. But like for me, Thursday night, I was having dinner, so I had time to watch some of the live hearings. And, it was actually just kind of an ugly, depressing matter. We had Gates, our lovely conservative congressman from Florida.
Old Matty boy.
Yes. And he basically wanted to change the first article of impeachment to basically investigating Hunter Biden instead of Joe Biden, which, to be completely honest, I think is a fair thing to say. Is that, I mean, in a perfect world, both Trump and Hunter Biden should be testifying. Let's be completely honest on that. Is that there's a lot of questions that need to be answered with Hunter Biden and Ukraine. And so Matt Gaetz started out strong by that, saying we need to change this and we need to bring in Hunter Biden for testimony and for this hearing. But then next he went to talk about Hunter Biden's potential drug abuse issues. He talked about how they found a crack pipe and a white powder in a rental car after he crashed it. And it went on from there. And then it took the hearts and soul of a congressman. I'm ashamed to forget who it was. But the gentleman basically just said, I don't know the specifics of any member in this room, but the fact you're bringing up someone's personal addiction issues shows how weak this discussion is getting. And then it came out a little bit later that Matt Gaetz had a DUI and he was, had his own issues. So he's probably not one to be, out there criticizing the Bidens, but that just shows you where the Republican argument has gone. It's
Yeah.
just gone to picking out the nitty gritty pieces of it and kind of forgetting the elephant in the room is that the president, I don't think he should be impeached, but he acted out of character of what the president should do, but these hearings were just so blatantly just ugly and pointless. And the vote was exactly how everyone would have thought it was going to turn out.
Yeah, that's the most depressing thing. Is it's like before we even started, it was like, okay, well, here's what's going to happen: is it's just going to end up voting by party lines. You had all these like ugly hearings, right? Like character attacks and weird conspiracy theories being thrown around, and then people voted by party lines. So it's like, okay, well, we all know how this is going to go. And it's going to go to the Senate, and Mitch McConnell's going to shut it down, and then that'll be that. It'll be over. It's very strange. It's very strange when, like, I don't know. Again, like we said, it's like I don't sense a lot of good faith.
No.
I don't sense a lot of good faith, like, oh, I'm going to really go home and dwell on this and what it means for the country. And I think it's a lot of how do we play our political side and how do we come out of this looking good for the next election. And that's just kind of the reality of our political system, which is sad. And like you said, I think you're right. Like, I think Nixon was the last one that was like kind of a true reflective impeachment process where the country as a whole looked at it. Because Clinton, I mean, we're going to get into how, the next process, how the White House counsel was going to be working with the defending party. Clinton did that. Clinton worked with the Democrats in the Congress were in cahoots with White House counsel to defend Clinton in the 90s. And that's exactly what's going to happen now with Republicans being in cahoots with White House counsel. I mean, they've admitted it. Mitch McConnell admitted it. He says, this is what happened in the 90s. Now we're on the opposing side, and we're going to do everything we can to work with White House counsel. Is that really how it's supposed to go? No, I don't think so. And both parties have been guilty of doing this. And so that's why I think Nixon was the last one where it was truly like Republicans and Democrats being like, okay, the president crossed the line. We need to really reflect as a country together. But we're just not in that environment at all anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think you're onto a point there about how it just seems unauthentic on both sides. And before we get on to the Senate, because I do really want to talk about that next here, but I just want to touch back on something you said earlier that I didn't have a chance to respond yet about. And you talk about how Nancy Pelosi, eventually decided to go with the impeachment process after a long period of recollection, right? And I would actually disagree with you to a certain extent about there being a better case than there was before. And it's just interesting to me is because a lot of people close to Trump have reported in the last week that he's actually shocked about this Ukraine scandal. Like, he is shocked that out of all the things he's done, that the Ukraine scandal is the thing that is bringing in such a hard look. And so to me, I don't think Nancy Pelosi had that much political strength to know that this was the time to go. I think the same way that the Republicans are defending Trump because of what their voters want, I think that that Nancy Pelosi just saw what public polls saw.
Well, sure.
I don't think it was any strength of her saying, okay, we finally have a good case. I think it's just people are sheep to a certain extent. And the same way that Republican voters want the Republican Congress to defend Trump, now it was just a change in public polls on that. And I honestly actually probably would have to agree with Trump that I don't think this is the worst thing he's done since he's been in office.
Well, I mean, who knows what okay, yeah, you're probably right. It's probably not the worst thing he's done. That's not a very uplifting defensive argument.
No, it's not.
No, but I mean, you're right. I mean, like, I think in Trump's mind, he was just doing any other deal like he normally does. I mean, he's a businessman. But I also think John Bolton was correct in understanding that this has greater implications than Trump realizes. Trump probably was just like, yeah, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And other people, and then, that are used to diplomacy and national security are like, that's not exactly how it works. It's I scratch your country's back, you scratch our country's back. But Trump wanted his own back scratched. It's like, I don't know. I do think it's a big thing. I mean, John Bolton called it a drug deal. Right. Like, you don't call something that, and that's John Bolton. That's a war hawk of a guy. But a
war hawk, but a smart diplomat.
A smart, yeah. I mean, of course, he understands the implications of what's happening. But I do also think you're right about Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, paying attention to the polls. I think if Nancy Pelosi had it her way, the Mueller report would have gone a little bit differently, and she would have done it then. But people were so done with the Mueller report and it had been dragged out so long, which is, again, that's par for the course for an investigation of that size. But in the
Right.
public's opinion, it was a long process, and people were just done with it. So it wasn't good timing. Yeah, of course she's looking at polls. Of course she is. That's her job. That, it may not be the best for democracy, but that's all they do is their job is to look at polls and react and try and drive narratives.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I mean, that, you make a good point. I mean, you make a good point. This might not be like legally the best argument that they could make. And so
No, and see, sorry to interrupt you. I apologize.
No, go for it. Go for it.
But I think that's a perfect segue on to now talking about the Senate. Because I don't think that there's a good legal argument for this. I've never thought there is. And I don't know. I kind of want to spend the next little bit of this episode before we're out of here on this one talking about what happens next in the Senate. Because I am truly convinced the Democrats are losing the PR battle. I really think that people turn on the news and they are seeing Democrats running a long and draining impeachment process. And now in the last 2 weeks, we've had Trump pass healthcare reform, a China deal, paid leave. And the problem is, I don't know if any of these are actually important legislative gains for him. But the thing is, he can still go off probably the most genius line of his entire presidency, which is they're investigating and I'm legislating.
Yeah.
And it's actually becoming problematic because Trump has passed in the last couple of weeks, and I'll get into it later, but he's passed a couple pretty bipartisan bills recently, while it does seem like Democrats are only concerned about trying to get Trump impeached.
But that's not okay. He's really good at that narrative, and you're right. That's the best line of his. That's like one of his best lines recently, as far as driving that narrative. It's not true that Democrats are only involved in impeachment. They can do two things at once. Especially the moderate Democrats. Moderate Democrats have been passing legislation regarding, they're involved in the same legislation that Trump is signing. That's how the legislative process works. Right. He's definitely good at driving the narrative that Democrats only care about impeachment, and it does definitely look like that in the media. But Congress is doing a bunch of things at once. The impeachment process. No one's watching C-SPAN for the little stuff. They're watching the impeachment process.
No, that's a good point. But like has always been a theme I like to discuss is two things can be true at once, and the media, what the media is covering and what is actually happening can be two separate stories, right? And I think Trump is a deeply flawed president, but the story that's out there right now is Democrats are impeaching and Trump is legislating. And obviously, like you just said, and I agree with you, it's not factually accurate. Obviously, any legislation requires more than just one party, but it's just more complicated than that, I think. And the Republican Party, I think, is actually winning the PR game right now.
I think so too. I think Democrats had a little bump at the beginning when this all came out, right? And again, that's why they tried to go as quick as they could through this impeachment process. But even then, it's still too long. Is because at the beginning of the Ukraine scandal, I think the Democrats jumped on the narrative as quick as possible and pushed it really hard, and it was effective at first. But now, like I said, it's the holidays now. People are trying to go to, we've had Thanksgiving, going to Christmas. People are thinking about families and stuff, and it's tiresome. Like I said, I personally, I admitted, I can't even watch these hearings anymore because it's tiresome. It's loathsome,
Yeah.
And so, I think you're right. If there's anything good the Democrats are at, it's at fucking losing the PR game. They almost always lose the PR game. And Trump got elected on his PR game. So you're right. I mean, he's definitely dominating that narrative for sure. And we'll see how long it lasts. And again, there's a long time between now and the election. So right. This whole Ukraine thing may not even be relevant come November.
I do, before we're out of here on this, I do want to talk about the Senate process and what's going to happen next.
Please do, yes.
So a conviction, according to The Economist, this is all coming from The Economist. They did a nice, about 4 or 5 page article on impeachment this week. It was their briefing section. And so basically a conviction requires 2/3 of the Senate, that's 67 senators, to vote against the president. And so, given that the Republican Party currently holds 53 Senate seats, this would require 20 members of the president's party to cross the floor. And The Economist basically argues, and it's something I completely agree with, is that public opinion needs to change. And so basically the only way that this would ever happen is if there was a change in public opinion, which I'm just going to say right now on the air, you have me recorded saying this, it's not going to happen.
It's not. I agree. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, like YouGov's, which is the Economist data recognizing software, I guess you could say, or agency that does it. They found the public opposed impeachment in 29 of 50 states. To me, that's telling it all of it. Almost 3 out of 5 states don't support impeachment. And so if you need to win a popularity game, you're just not going to do it. And it goes back to what I was saying, is it's a PR game that they are losing. And I almost would argue that the Senate process might actually hurt the Democrats even more. I really do.
Yeah, well, again, because our system is based on like states, right? Because I think popular vote, like if you took the entire voting populace just as a big number, it's probably closer to 50-50, if not. And again, Trump's overall approval rating has always been below 50%. But then again, our political system doesn't work like that, as we, see time and again. It's about the first past the post in the states. So that's why that polling as far as states is probably, like, in a statistics course, it wouldn't be the most accurate, but in a political course, it would be, because that's how we do it, is about who wins the states. So the fact that, almost 3 out of 5 states are against impeachment is very telling. And again, it's going to come down to what states, right? Like Democrats don't care if Mississippi is against impeachment, right? Of course it is. And the Republicans don't care if California is pro impeachment, because of course it is. But the states to really watch are going to be the swing states: Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida. And then again, also like and then the thing you posted, right? The senators that are in danger, and I'll be sure to edit that into the video so our viewers can see it as well. The U.S. Senate races in 2020, and those guys are going to have to worry about what their constituents think of impeachment when they go to vote in the Senate.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and that actually brings me back. He is not a senator; he is a congressman. But it's actually interesting. It broke, I think, last night, and I'm sorry to kind of go off on it's relevant. That a New Jersey Democrat, Jeff Van Drew, is considering switching parties. It came out last night. He's an outspoken critic on impeachment. This is a New Jersey Democrat who I think is in a very purple part of the voting area.
Right.
And he is actually talking about switching to be a Republican. And to me, that is actually thoroughly mind-blowing, because I think a lot of the media covers, which Republicans are going to defect on Trump. And this, to me, says that impeachment is not going to go very well.
No, it's not.
I am telling you, it's pretty bad when a freshman Democrat is looking at his voting base and says, no, like this is not going to work well. That's
also happening with Joe Manchin, the U.S. Senator from West Virginia. This guy's a blue dog Democrat. He has a D by his name, but he represents, kind of old school Democrats, where it's really like union guys, working class. And he's in West Virginia, right? And West Virginia is not in favor of impeachment. And so Joe Manchin, he's considering, voting against impeachment. And again, like you said, Democrats need 20 Republicans on top of everyone in their own party. And Joe Manchin, as a senator, is one in the Democrats. It's like, I don't know about this. My constituents are pretty far pro-Trump. So yeah, there's no way. There's no way in hell the Senate is going to impeach the president. No. And on top of that, again, talk about good faith, is Mitch McConnell's already just confirmed it. He even said in an interview Thursday evening with Fox News, this is quotes, "There is zero chance the president will be removed from office." And again, he's supposed to be an impartial juror, and everyone on the Senate is supposed to be an impartial juror in this trial, but I don't think anyone is.
No, and it's actually it's funny you mentioned that, because that was the part I highlighted in my notes here. I basically highlighted that Pandora's box is opened if witnesses testify during the Senate hearing.
Yeah.
That's the big fear for Republicans, is that basically, let's think about who would be called to testify in the Senate. It would be Bolton, Biden. I do think Hunter Biden would be called, but you'd have Bolton, Mick Mulvaney, and I don't think that would be good for president. You might even have to eventually have Mike Pence. There would be potential of Rick Perry, and it would honestly open Pandora's box. So I think Mitch McConnell is making a very calculated decision to say that we are shutting the doors on witnesses, because yes, we complained about not having witnesses during the House inquiry, but right now we cannot open that box. And I think it's a quite bad political move, and it shows that they all have to swear an oath, once this trial starts, they're going to be impartial. There's no way. I mean, Lindsey Graham also, he said there's no way he's going to pretend to be a fair juror when he was in, I think, Doha last week. And it just tells you that the Republicans have made up their mind already. But, I mean, I think the same could be said about Democrats.
Of course. No, of course. Of course. I mean, unless you have a guy like Joe Manchin who, again, who knows what he actually thinks. He's going off his constituents. He knows he needs to get reelected in West Virginia. So he's probably looking at all the polls of who supports impeachment and going, all right, so that's how I'm going to vote, So, yeah, like, it's depressing, man. We always touch this. It's just depressing how inauthentic, and entrenched our political realm is. Because, like, yeah, like, the fact that we can just predict how this is all going to go down before it even does, like, all right, it's going to go through the House because the Democrats want it to go through the House. And then it's going to die in the Senate because the Republicans want it to die in the Senate. And that is what's going to happen. It's just sad. It's just unfortunate that we can predict all this because of how entrenched everyone is.
That's true.
And I don't know. I don't even know what else to say. I mean, yeah, like, you have Lindsey Graham saying stuff like, and for Bill Clinton in the 90s, as soon as he blocks subpoenas, that's an impeachable offense. And then now we have it going on today, and Democrats are now saying that, and Republicans aren't doing anything about it. It's like, I think like the impeachment process for Clinton was kind of a sham, and Democrats should not have worked with the White House counsel and stuff. And Republicans wanted frothing at the mouth to get rid of Clinton, and now we're just seeing the opposite. It's just flip sides. That's all it is.
That's a good point, man. And like there's a study that I've been reading. I think it was YouGov. I believe it was YouGov. It was quoted on Ben Shapiro's show last week, and it was actually a really interesting study that found that a lot of moderates in middle America who voted for Trump went back to vote for Democrats in the 2018 midterm.
Right.
And now are going back to Trump most likely for the 2020 presidential election. And to me, I think it kind of shows where the nation's at, is that on a state level, people have their own biases, their own views, their own needs, which are specific to wherever you're from.
Exactly.
But on a national level, I don't think people give that much of a damn. I really don't think people hate Trump as much as the media is pulling it out to be. Like, it's true that if he was a nicer person and just maybe shut his mouth, I think he'd be doing better.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think it does show that he's not. I don't think we're as divided as people think. I think that there's more people that are willing to vote Democrat in regional elections and for Trump on a national level.
Yeah,
I really think it's hard.
I think
it's really hard.
I think that there is a cultural war going on, right? That, like, there's people that are very entrenched on the right, people that are very entrenched on the left. But you're right. I think there's still a big amount of people that are kind of in the middle or not exactly idealistic. In political science, people always talk about the easiest way to, to find out what people will vote for is like what helps their pocketbook, what helps them in their life, right? With their immediate life. And you said it best, right? People from different parts of the country have different circumstances that may affect them. Joe Manchin's a perfect example of a Democrat that just got elected in West Virginia, but that's a state that's going to definitely go red for Trump next year as in the presidential part. But they have different needs. Joe Manchin's a blue dog Democrat that's trying to get, industrial jobs back, and people in West Virginia like that. And so you're right that there is this definitely a block of people that are less idealistic and more about what helps me in my life right now. But I still think culturally that there is a divide is growing. And I think the politicians are utilizing it for their own gain, right?
Yes.
Politicians come off as way more idealistic than they really are. They're just, they're utilitarian. They're just trying to do whatever it takes to get reelected. But if it's beneficial for them to use idealism to their advantage and to entrench people, then they will, and that's what we're seeing.
That's a very good point, you know. And yeah, I'm actually, honestly, speaking of Joe Manchin, I'm actually curious to see what happens with him. Much like Susan Collins on the other side.
Right.
You know, senator of Maine who voted for Kavanaugh. I remember that was her I remember the media loved her so much before that vote.
Yeah, they called it like this was her grave mistake. You know, yeah.
And it's like, no, like both of us have just said, we're a big country. We're almost the size of Europe. There's a lot of differences in this country, you know, and I think that's why both parties are taking a gamble. I think Trump Republicans are taking a gamble and thinking that he can win all of this, and I think Democrats are taking a gamble going so in on this impeachment. I think that both parties are missing a certain electorate, and I'm still curious to see where that goes in 2020. But that's for another episode, I guess, right?
Yeah, it is going to be fascinating, and especially after something like 2016, you know, like so much is up in the air. I think you said it best that both sides are taking a big gamble right now. I definitely think that is the case. We're in such a new era of politics, and Trump has really, you know, credit where credit's due. He's shaken up the game, whether it's for better or worse. Trump has definitely shaken up the political field. And you're right. I think both parties are trying to adapt, and they're gambling, and we'll see who makes the better bet come next year.
Yeah, completely. And it's still early, you know. I mean, we still have a little less than a year until the election, so a lot can happen. And like you said, who knows? Ukraine could be a past memory in a month. Like, who knows, man?
Yeah, exactly. Ukraine might just go with the wind, just like a lot of scandals. But that'll probably bring us to the end of this episode, guys. We are changing up our format just a little bit. We're actually going to be doing 2 episodes a week. We're going to be trying that out, and if it goes well, then we'll continue with that. So stay tuned for another episode coming out in a few days, and we will be discussing the World Trade Organization and what that means for Brexit. Some fascinating stuff. So stay with us, guys, and as always, please leave a comment. Alex, do you want to say anything before we get out of here?
I do. Just a quick housekeeping thing. First off, I'm really excited about trying this new thing. Hopefully bringing more content to everyone will work. We shall see. And second off, if you guys listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, YouTube, please leave comments, especially Apple's algorithm. It is very important to leave comments for us if you like what we're doing. Even, I guess, if you hate what we're doing. The way that they put podcasts toward the top is by getting more feedback on comments. So I would love it if you guys have anything to say. Please leave your comments in the comment section. And I think other than that, we're all set. You guys have a great week.